We're rolling.
Welcome to the REI Rookies Podcast.
The Real Estate Investing Rookies Podcast, episode number 69, where we invite you to follow us on our journey towards financial freedom using the power of real estate. I'm Josh Koth.
And I'm Jack Haas.
And here at REI Rookies, we believe in a couple of key principles. Number one, the best way to retain information is by teaching it to others. And number two, a rising tide lifts all boats. We're not competitors, we're a community. So let's get into some real estate investing.
So this week we're going to move into part two and hopefully our final segment on why real estate investing. It's always important to revisit this topic and keep it top of mind.
Yeah, like we mentioned in the last episode, we just have to keep that motivation level high. And sometimes you just have to remind yourself after you get told no about 1,000 times in a row, or you have a major repair, or you have an eviction, or something horrific happens in your investing business. You got to remind yourself why you're doing this, right? What's the long-term goal? What's our North Star? What's our guiding compass, direction that we're headed? Because sometimes it's a rough go of it. And so you got to keep that motivation level up to the challenge, right? So you can get over those humps, get over those hurdles, and keep on trucking. So last week we kind of went through the first half of this talk that we give once in a while to some investing groups and other starting up investors. So we're going to continue on this PowerPoint and just go through some of the reasons why we chose real estate as our method of passive investing. And the first slide we're going to talk about now is called the calculations. So really the main point of this is speed is of the essence, right? So when you're evaluating properties, you don't want to waste any time that you don't have to getting to the point where you can write an offer, because the most productive thing you can do as a real estate investor is write offers, right? Because every one out of every so many offers is going to get accepted. So if you need to purchase so many houses a year, you can back into how many offers you need to write once you know that percentage. So getting to an offer price as quickly as you can is crucial. And there's lots of kind of rules of thumb, and we'll go over a couple of those. And the main thing to understand is, you need to figure out in your market or whatever market you're buying and selling in, what is a good deal? How much below market value would be considered a good deal to another investor? So if you're going to wholesale the property, what amount of headroom do you need to leave for them to make a profit? And then you buy under that so you can make your wholesale fee if wholesaling is your strategy. Or if you're flipping, what the normal ARV for a certain type of house, and how to get to an offer price based on the cost of materials and labor in your market. So a couple of these formulas that we use, one is called the 1% rule. And that basically states in the buy and hold market, if a property rents for $1,000 a month, that the rent should equal 1% of the purchase price or more, meaning you could only pay up to $100,000 for that property in order for it to cash flow. It's a rule of thumb based on the typical amount of expenses you have. Insurance costs, those things all vary, right, per market. So you maybe need to figure out first of all, what's a good deal in your market? What's achievable in your market? Some markets, that's impossible to do, right? On some of the coasts, try to buy a house in San Francisco and hit the 1% rule with rent. It's not going to happen. You might hit 0.1% or something similar to that. So that's one, is the 1% rule. So we use that all the time when we're talking to other landlords. They start kind of going off on all the nice features of their property, and we just stop them and say, well, what does it rent for, right? And let's say they're asking $200,000 for a house, and they say it rents for $1,100 a month. Well, we know we're about $90,000 off from the maximum we would pay for this property. So it kind of puts the brakes on the conversation sometimes, which is fine, because if they don't have sufficient motivation or the understanding that to an investor that house is only worth about $110,000, then you don't want to waste time chatting with them, right?
Yeah, and you want to be really transparent with them regarding your numbers. It does really weed out those people who aren't motivated enough. Mm-hmm. But we were just talking about this before the shows began. Every single one of them, without exception, almost, it's always under rented.
Yeah, well, and that's just, a typical feature of every landlord thinks their place isn't generating enough rent. At least in our market, we found that to be true. But, we base our numbers off what they're getting in rent. Unless they are ridiculously under rented, according to our evaluations, then there's a little wiggle room there. But, what a place is rented for is what it's rented for. So that's a good starting point. If you can get the rent up, great. More profit for you, higher cash flow.
And the 1% rule is a great place to start those conversations, because more times than not, them as investors themselves, they usually know that rule. Mm-hmm. It's a good place to start the conversation.
Right, and it kind of resets expectations as far as if they're going to sell to an investor, that's probably the most they can expect. And then you start talking about deferred maintenance from there. My line is, I always say, I pay up to 1% rule for a perfect house. Meaning if it needs a roof, if it needs a furnace or something, then we're taking that off that price, and we're only going down from that starting point. So it really resets that maximum price that they're expecting to a much lower number, and you can get there pretty quick. So that's a great rule to understand and to use when you're talking to sellers. And you can justify everything in it, because you can say, well, based on 1%, here's a typical amount of expenses involved in owning a property. And it allows, X amount of cash flow, and really we're not satisfied making any less than that. And they can't really dispute any of those numbers, because they're kind of industry standard, how much you set aside for vacancy and maintenance and insurance and all those things. So all those costs are sort of fixed. The only thing they could debate was how much profit you think you're entitled to. And if we're trying to get 20% of collected rents as our cash flow, well, that's $200 out of $1,000 rent. That's not, what I would say out of line by anyone's standards. So it's a great way to get to a decent offer price right out of the gate and weed out people that don't have sufficient motivation.
So that's kind of the quick calculation we start with when it comes to buy and holds. Mm-hmm. But we do calculate things differently when it comes to flipping as an exit.
And I know there's all kinds of formulas out there, but one that we've sort of settled into and is really, really simple is you can pay about 50% of the ARV for a flip. And if you do that, typically in our market, you'll probably be okay. So that's a good starting point. Obviously, your mileage will vary depending on, some towns don't have as much margin and as much spread if they're highly competitive, right? But you have to evaluate this for your own market. And that's really the point, is to get to a point where you can make an offer as quickly as possible. And whatever formulas and rules of thumb you have to figure out for your market, spend some time up front doing that, so you can get to that place where you can write an offer and write it sight unseen too, because you don't want to have to be going to look at every property that you're going to write an offer on, right? You have to understand that there is some risk involved, and you need to know the neighborhoods in your market really well, so you can feel confident writing an offer. Once you get to that point where you are comfortable, you're not going to have time to go walk through every property.
This is one of the benefits of staying a bit more local, especially when you're first starting out. Mm-hmm. I know that the grass is always greener in some of these other markets, and we always see every year some website or some publication posts the best rental properties in the United States. And it's typically not going to be where you live. Mm-hmm. But your market is always going to be the best place to start.
Yeah, I feel like no matter where we live, we could probably make money doing real estate investing. And if you want to purchase in other markets, you can always start that up later or look into just some turnkey companies. There's lots of them out there where if you can purchase in better cash flowing markets. Maybe in your market, the only strategy that works is fixing and flipping, right? Because you just can't hit any cash flow numbers. You can't get close to the 1% rule as far as buy and holds. So maybe you wholesale and you flip in your market and you roll those profits into turnkey in a market that does cash flow. There's all kinds of strategies you can use.
So we do have a very quick calculator. It's a little Excel spreadsheet. You can find it on our Patreon page as a download. It's not behind any paywall. It's just free to download there, but you're welcome to head over to patreon.com/REI Rookies.
Yes, excellent. All right, so let's talk about some exit strategies. So typically there's 4 exit strategies we use. And we'll go through what each of these is really quickly. And we have episodes on every one of these. If you look through the history of the podcast, we have episodes dedicated to these, so definitely go back and listen to those. But the first one is wholesaling. So that's basically you find a property and you buy it cheap enough where you can tack on a fee and sell it to another investor where it's still a good deal for them, right? And if you can find a buyer to buy it from you prior to closing, then you can do a double close, or you can assign the contract and you don't even have to raise the money to close on the property. So that's a great way for people to get started that may not have a bunch of money. But the key to that is you really need to find deeply discounted properties. So that's wholesaling. So that's one thing we do periodically. Another one is called wholetailing, or we used to call that a quick flip. It basically means you find a property at a wholesale price, but it doesn't need a lot of work. And then you just kind of time the market, put it back on the MLS and sell it to an end buyer, sell it to someone that's going to live in it, and sell it for full retail price, and you make your spread there. So both of those are activities that generate chunks of cash. And here's a third one that does that as well, fix and flip. So that's what you see on the TV shows, Flip or Flop and those kind of shows. You buy a property really cheap that has a lot of distress, and you flip it, you rehab it, and then you sell it to an owner-occupant on the retail market and make your spread that way. So those first three strategies are all ones that generate chunks of cash. Those are really jobs, right? You can't ever stop doing those. They're not going to generate any passive income unless you own a business and you hire people to do all the jobs for you. It can be a business technically, but if you, as the investor, are actively pursuing wholesale deals, wholetail deals, or fix and flips, then those are really active investing. So our main goal, our North Star, is buy and hold, which is the last exit strategy. So that's where you purchase a property, rent it out, and you have that cash flow coming in as passive income.
So we probably should say this too, and I think just to reset expectations on the buy and hold, because I know when I first started, the first thought is that you're going to make a lot of money quickly on the buy and hold, right? I mean, and
right.
that can be true if you're able to just own the property outright. But if you're going to do some sort of leveraging, you can expect, that margin to be somewhat slim. And if you have one appliance go out, you could blow your cash flow for 3 to 6 months or more.
Yeah, that's it.
What's going on?
Buy and hold is a long-term, slow and steady play, unless you find amazing deals, right? I mean, if you find an amazing deal that cash flows a huge chunk of money, I mean, that happens. I mean, there's people out there that can do that. Again, your mileage may vary depending on your market and your ability to find deeply discounted deals. They're out there, but I would say the average, like you said, the expectations differ from the reality. So, if you think you need so many doors to be financially free, of buy and hold properties, you can probably, 1.5 times that. If you think you need 50 doors, you probably need 75, right? Just because of the realities of maintenance and vacancies and everything else. So definitely kind of reset your expectations as far as that, and be prepared to do what it takes to get there. Just over the long haul. It's a long-term strategy that you really have to grind out for a few years to get there. So, moving on to the next thing is an infinite ROI. Actually, yeah, that's the next slide.
For-profit centers.
Yep. So we talked about the 4 exit strategies quickly. So now we're going to talk about the 4 profit centers. So this is the 4 ways that you generate profit from your real estate investing, right? First one is the one everybody thinks of. It's just straight cash on cash return, right? So after you pay all your expenses out of the rents and your debt service, this is the money that's left over. This is your profit, your passive income. That's pretty easy to calculate what your returns are. So that's one profit center. That's the one everyone thinks of typically.
The next thing would be appreciation, and most people are familiar with this as well. And depending on your investing strategy, we do have some investors who kind of rely on appreciation as their investment vehicle. But that is just the way the property is going to increase in value over time. More times than not, depending on your market, it's just going to run in parallel to inflation, maybe perform just a little better.
Yep, and this, is very market specific. Some markets appreciate 10% a year. Here in the upper Midwest, we're, 2 to 5% a year, pretty much keeping pace with inflation. We don't invest for appreciation, but it's nice gravy, and it maintains the buying power of any equity we have sitting in the property. That's the reason that we care about appreciation, and it adds to the cumulative return. So the third one is depreciation. So this reduces your tax burden and can offset your active income. And this is one of the main benefits of having buy and hold real estate. It can offset those money generating activities. The other three exit strategies, wholetailing, and fix and flip. Those activities are taxed at the highest rate because of the types of income that's earned through them. So by buying and holding a certain amount of properties in conjunction with doing the other three strategies, you can really offset and reduce your tax burden. So depreciation is a huge, huge benefit to owning buy and hold real estate.
And one that is typically overlooked is amortization. And usually we know that when we take out a loan, right? We're paying an amortized schedule. Well, in our case, we get to take advantage of that because our tenant or resident is paying our mortgage, so we get that benefit as a fourth profit center.
Right. So when you add all those up, they can be a really high cumulative ROI. Your mileage may vary, as we've said multiple times, but you can usually greatly exceed any other type of investment. And when you see real estate as compared to other investments, and we mentioned this on the last podcast, a lot of times they're only concerned with the cash on cash return. That's kind of their apples to apples, cash on cash return versus a stock. Well, really, when you add all these four profit centers of real estate together, you can probably double, triple, quadruple any returns you're probably going to see from a typical stock or mutual fund or other type of paper investment. And that's really, those combined is what really makes real estate awesome. And mainly the tax benefits, right? Because if you get a tax benefit, it's exactly the same thing as making more money, right? If you pay $20,000 less in taxes, that's money that didn't have to leave your pocket. So it's like making $20,000 more. If you had a job, imagine you had a job, right, and your salary was $100,000 a year, but you had to pay 50% in taxes. Well, that's $50,000 you get to take home. I'd much rather have a job where I made $75,000 and paid $5,000 in taxes, keep 70, right? I mean, it's whatever you get to keep. The amount of money that you net every year is what's truly important. So don't underestimate the depreciation and the tax benefits of owning, buy, and hold real estate. So that's kind of the four profit centers, and that's how you get a really high cumulative ROI when you add all those up. But what's better than a 40 or 60% ROI? Can you think of anything better?
Infinite.
Exactly.
So this is actually something that took a while until we experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
We've heard this strategy talk. Any real estate investing book, any podcast you listen to, this is always brought up as a strategy. This concept of infinite ROI. But until you actually do it, that's when I thought it finally stuck for us. Or at least for me.
Yep, exactly. So I'll just take you through a quick example of how you can achieve an infinite ROI. And we really kind of worked our way into this eventually just because we were realizing real quick we're going to run out of our own money, right? So we needed to figure out a way to purchase properties not using our money. Also, we realized cash offers were getting accepted a lot higher chance of getting accepted with a deeper discount. So we figured out quickly if we combine all those things and along with cash out refis through a lender, you can achieve this infinite ROI. And I'll take you through an example real quick. So let's say you have a property that is worth $120,000. That's the ARV, the retail value. Let's say it's tax assessed at $100,000. Let's say it rents for $1,200, just as an example. Well, let's say you were able to work out a deal and purchase that for $70,000, right? So you use private money that you borrowed from a private lender, and you pay back them, a percentage, whatever return you guys agree on. You borrow that money to acquire the property for the $70,000. You put $5,000 in rehab into the property, so you're into basically $75,000. Let's say you have a lender that allow you to pull out 80% of tax assessed value. Remember we said tax assessed value was $100,000, so you could pull out $80,000. Well, you pay back your lender, you pay for the rehab, and you pay for the acquisition of the property, and you still put a few thousand in your pocket. Now you have a property that's been rehabbed. You throw a tenant in there, it's for $1,200. Remember we stated. So your cash on cash return is about $2,880, about $240 a month, so $2,880 a year. And normally you divide your yearly cash flow over the amount you put into the property to get your cash on cash return. Well, remember, we put nothing into this property. In fact, we profited from the acquisition of this property a few thousand, about $3,600 in our pocket. So really your return at that point is infinite because you have none of your own money sitting in the property and you have a cash flowing asset that's producing a return, and it costs you none of your own money to get. So what's to stop you from doing 3 or 4 of those a month until you just stack them up on top and build your portfolio that way? And that's kind of what we realized was how we were going to reach our passive income goals, is through that infinite ROI strategy. And it is achievable. We've done it several times now. It just relies on having a good relationship with the lender and being able to purchase properties at a deep enough discount where you can extract all the money that you used to acquire it and rehab it.
Yeah, one of the tricks there is to build that relationship with a local lender that can do internal underwriting. And so it's typically going to be those smaller banks, credit unions, that type of thing that are kind of centralized to your region. Yep,
and you can't walk into a Wells Fargo and ask for this type of loan. But once you have a relationship set up with a local lender that makes in-house underwriting decisions as well as holds the loan in-house, that's what you're looking for. So, this brings us to our next point. So obviously the goal here is to buy deeply discounted property, right? I mean, we bought this place that was worth $120,000 for $70,000, right? That only needed like $5,000 in rehab. Well, that seems pretty hard to achieve. And it is hard to achieve. But what you need to realize is it's just a numbers game. You need to stumble across the person who's willing to sacrifice that amount of equity for speed or quick cash or whatever you're offering as an investor. And that, again, goes back to you need to be able to make offers quickly because you don't want to waste a bunch of time because you need to get a bunch of offers out there. Let's say only 1 out of every 50 gets accepted. That means, you're going to write 50 offers, but every time you want to do a deal. If you need 2 deals a month, that means you need to write 100 offers a month. Well, that's pretty, you can't be wasting much of time walking through each property if you have to write 100 offers a month. And your real estate agent really is not going to want to walk through 100 properties a month either if you're looking at stuff on the MLS. So you need to figure your numbers quickly, evaluate if someone has sufficient motivation, and get to the point where you can write an offer. And you need to get over mentally the hurdle that people are going to be insulted by your offer, which was profitable to you, but some would see as insulting to them. And we always say the asking price is a suggestion, right? In fact, a lot of times we don't even care what the asking price is. We'll evaluate what a property's worth or what it could rent for and back into our offer price from there. And what they're asking is kind of irrelevant. In fact, I almost don't want to know because sometimes if I'm offering half of what the asking price is, I might get a little tinge of, oh boy, this is not good. I'd rather just say, hey, give me the address and we'll figure out what we'll make an offer on the property for, and we'll submit that. You have to learn how to be able to do that guilt-free. Either directly to sellers, which is hard as an investor. You have to, make those types of what people might consider insulting offers in a way that there's a chance that they could get accepted. And if it's on the MLS, then you have to find an agent willing to submit those on your behalf and who can speak with listing agents in a way that gives them the best chance of being considered at least.
Yeah, so that's actually pretty big. And we always have our agent, every agent we work with, we have them submit those offers in writing. That you are going to run into quite a few that are going to want to float your offer by the seller agent, just to kind of get a softball type of response.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that if you have them do that, it's not required for them to present that information to the seller. You want to have that information presented, so it has to be done in writing. And sometimes you might have to find that agent willing to submit those offers on your behalf.
And that's work you should be willing to do up front. Interview a bunch of agents, talk to a bunch, and then just lay out your strategy. Say, are you willing to submit an offer, that's maybe half of what they're asking? Do you have a problem with that? Or are you going to be okay with that? Because I'm going to have you write a bunch of offers that are going to be profitable to me and may or may not be insulting to the seller. And we're going to keep writing them until someone says yes, and we're going to do it over and over again. If they're not into that, then just find somebody else. I mean, in our particular town of 150,000 people, there's 800 agents, right? So, just like you're looking for, the seller who'll say yes, you need to find an agent who is willing to do that on your behalf. And it's worth putting that time in up front.
And I think our agents now, they know we're going to perform on them. So even though they have to take that beating on their end, they know that once we do land it, we're going to perform on it.
Yeah, I mean, they get paid back in volume. I mean, you might be making, buying properties cheaply, but you might do 10, 15, 20 deals a year for them, and that can be a significant source of their income. And once, honestly, writing an offer is not that hard anymore. You used to have to write them up with paper and use couriers to deliver everything. Now it's all electronic through DocuSign. It takes about 5 minutes for our agent to write up an MLS offer. It doesn't take a ton of their time. And the most time they have to spend is calling up the listing agents, letting them know an offer's coming and submitting those and having that conversation. So, but they'll understand it's going to be a benefit to them if they have a steady source of deals. So you need to find somebody who understands that's mutually beneficial.
And we should probably say too, if you're submitting offers on the MLS, it takes a lot of offers. If we're talking to 20 sellers, private sellers, to get one deal, it might be double that going through the MLS just because of the coaching and everything that and expectations the MLS provides. So it's all a volume business when you're dealing with offers on the MLS.
Yeah, exactly. And remember, every other investor in town is seeing the same properties, so it's probably going to take a lot more offers per deal. And you definitely can't fall in love with these and make sure there's no emotion tied to this. If you miss out, you just miss out. And
there's one bonus thing is that most people forget, including the agents themselves, that creativity in your offers on the MLS is acceptable. You don't have to just give a cash offer. You can have them write up offers with terms or what have you as well.
Yeah, we had our agent broker a potential deal with the landlord who had a bunch of properties, kind of a package. And this is when we were kind of starting out. We didn't have access to a lot of private capital. And we basically tried to work out a seller finance deal. It didn't work out, but he was willing to mediate and to, help us present that to him. We didn't really have that confidence yet. And so, if you find an agent who understands the investing game and they're willing to do that, I mean, you can write creative offers. You can write contract for deed, seller finance type options. They learn about that stuff in real estate school, right? They have to learn about what these different types of transactions are, but most of them don't ever do it because they only understand conventional financing or FHA or cash offers. They don't understand that a lot of times the seller has other options available to them, and if your agent's willing to present those, that's huge. So take advantage of that skill.
So I think we're going to wrap up here for now, and we'll do a third installment because I think the next topic is going to be somewhat lengthy, but we'll talk about private investors, how we handle some of that capital, and how we do our cash offers.
Right, and how we use private capital to build our portfolio in pursuit of, getting a passive income level that allows us to be financially free, and how that all kind of ties together.
So with that, if you have any questions for us, please send us an email at info@reirookies.com.
Hit us up on Twitter and Facebook at REIRookies, and if you have some private capital you'd like to invest with us, check out investwithvpp.com. We can put some of that money on the sidelines to work for you.
And please, we're going to beg you, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps others find the show. And remember, get off the bench.
And get into the game. We'll see you next time.